All right, it's 7 o'clock straight up. Thank you to those who are joining us live and those who will view this through the recorded version. I'd like to do a little cleanup from last week when we talked about pre-snap and dead ball. When we were talking about the illegal substitution philosophy, um, let's be really, really clear. These questions came from people that were on the call. You're either on the field or you're off. And by definition, you're off the field if you have something out of bounds. Now, so someone said, well, what if the guy has jumped from inbounds and has not landed yet out of bounds? What is his status? His status is inbounds. Therefore, he's fouled. Okay. So that's the first question. Then the next question came up relative to five-person mechanics. And of course, we focus on seven in this training, but we know that there are people that are working with five at the varsity level and certainly below the varsity level. So in that particular instance, unfortunately, we have no other choice but to put that into the hands of the short wing. Now, that's a tough task because the short wing obviously has responsibility for the neutral zone. And in the next thing we're going to talk about, we'll illustrate why it's so important not to lose our focus on the neutral zone. So the only thing that I can really say to line of scrimmage people in five is try not to get tunnel vision looking like down a pipe in the neutral zone. Open your vision so that you can see that guy coming off the field to your left or your right, and do the best you can with that. But the back judge is just not in a position where he or she is going to be able to make that determination on or off. In seven, we have the benefit of a side judge or a field judge to be able to make that determination. We're not so fortunate with five. Okay, and then the third thing that came up in discussion would be what would happen if Team A was rushing to try to get the snap off to catch Team B with more than 11 on the field and they false start? And it was suggested, is that an offset? And the answer to that is emphatically no, because remember that illegal substitution is a live ball foul. A false start would be a dead ball foul. Therefore, it's tough luck for Team A. It's their responsibility to make sure that they put the ball in play legally. And if they don't, we're going to essentially ignore the illegal substitution potential because that's not a foul until a snap. And we're going to enforce the false start. Now, we're going to have to give an explanation of that. And the teammate coach is not going to like it, but tough. That's the way it is. So the cleanup from last week covers those 3 points. So if something isn't clear, by all means, feel free to contact me and we'll take another run at it. Okay, tonight is the fourth of 5 preseason training sessions. We'll wrap things up Monday of next week on the 26th and have everybody full tilt ready to go. The topic for the last preseason is intentionally base mechanics. It was placed there in recognition of the fact that if you do have the good benefit to work a scrimmage, you're probably not getting a lot of reps at field judge, side judge. You might get a few at back judge, but we want to make sure that we hit the ground running week 1. So we're going to use our time in that last training session specifically for mechanics. All right, tonight we'll be on quality fouls. And some people might be saying, Rich, you cover this topic every year. Well, yes, we do. But you know what? We're not the only organization who covers it every year. In fact, talking with an active NFL official this week, it came as no surprise that he told me that they spent quite a bit of time at the NFL clinic last month talking about what they call foul selection. So whether you're using make it be their fouls, whether you're calling them quality fouls, or whether you're calling them foul selection. It really doesn't matter as long as you're on the same page as a crew. But rest assured, this is one of the most important things that we do individually and especially collectively on the field, is to be able to ascertain what requires fouling action and what things we can pass on. So with that lead in, we will go to the PowerPoint, which I've updated with some new information this year. And once again, as is our case, our practice, we will make this PowerPoint available to everyone when we get the recording in the next day or so. So this first frame deals with the whole aspect, the big picture about quality fouls. We're looking for something that is either a sporting, a safety, or a clear competitive advantage that is not intended by the rules. Everything else should be interpreted as a break in the game flow, which is not a good idea. We need to stay off of those things that look bad, that we really, really are tempted to throw a flag just because it looks like a train wreck. But then when we look at the video, we realize that the contact was either incidental or not nearly as bad as we thought it was at the time. Okay, so let's make sure that we draw a clear and distinct line in the sand with what we would term to be general game fouls compared to those safety, decorum, as well as procedural fouls. Now, as the deep three, we don't deal with a lot of procedural things. Those would be things like formations, false starts, those sorts of things. Most of what we're doing downfield deals with holding, pass interference, block in the back, and so on. There is to be no latitude, no gray area with safety or decorum. Here, if this coach hasn't already been flagged, shame on us. Now, this was a few years ago before the focus was as strong as it is now. But clearly, this coach is on the field. He's beyond, not only on the field, he's beyond the official on the field. And Mark Ewell has made it really, really clear that he expects the coaching staff to stay in the white and preferably off the field, certainly during live balls. But if they have something that they want to communicate to us, whether it be very polite or not so polite, they need to stay off the field, off of the green. So here, this is clearly a foul that we must get. We cannot pass. It's not a talk to, it's foul. Get it, correct it, and report it accordingly. All right, the play over here to the right is clearly a safety foul. It's also a game management foul. If we don't get this foul, we're going to have a whole kettle of fish and a big, big problem controlling the game from this point forward, because they're already going to be ticked off at the player that took a shot, a cheap shot at a teammate, let alone if we don't foul it and potentially disqualify this player. So these things have to be addressed. This might be targeting. It might be a disqualifying foul. We only have a one-dimensional view, so it's difficult to say. Continuing on, we have to have crew consistency here. You know, we have to be on the same page. It's not going to work if one side of the field is tighter than a drum and the other side is loosey-goosey. We got to go into the game with the thought in mind that we're going to see plays that are similar and have a similar outcome. Presume that actions on the field are legal. Don't assume that you've got a foul. Presume it's not a foul until the action deems itself to be a foul. We're not looking to catch people doing something wrong. We're looking to catch those things that have an unfair advantage, or as previously stated, unsporting or unsafe. We're not going to be judged by the number of flags we throw in a game. if after the game you're going out for a beverage afterwards and the conversation is about the number of flags that you threw individually or that the crew threw as being some measure of success, um, based on a lot of fouls being thrown, then we're headed in the wrong direction. The conversation should be that the flags that we did throw were important and we deem them to be, when we see the video, confirming that they were correct. Remember that it takes a whole lot more guts to make a no call than it does to throw a flag on something that looks bad. Because the people in the stands, when they see something that they recognize as being unusual, they're not surprised when they see a flag. On the other hand, we have to, and as we'll talk here in a few minutes, we have to put things into a very nice, tidy box if we're going to throw the laundry on the field. Keep in mind that the first foul in any category is very, very important. Might be the most important foul of the game because it sets a standard that we're going to follow. So whether you're the umpire or the back judge or wherever you are on the field, understand that holding, DPI, OPI, blocks in the back, that first foul sets the tone. So make sure it's at a standard that we're fully prepared as a crew to follow for the rest of the game all the way through the conclusion. Communication or information sharing is essential. That goes along with communication. You know, we have different angles on the field and we are a crew. The most important thing is that we get it right. We should not hesitate to come in and provide information to a brother or sister official. You have a different look at it. Say it's a punt return, and as the side judge, I have a flag for a block in the back. At the end of the play, if the back judge comes to me and says, "What do you have?" And I say, "I have a block in the back, number 16," and he says, "Rich, I saw that block all the way. That's a side block." I'm gonna pick up that flag and I'm gonna thank that back judge for bailing me out. Then when we look at the video, I'm sure we're going to see exactly what he said occurred. Now, we're going to have to do some public relations with the sideline because the coach that sees the flag down that benefits him is going to want it, going to want that foul enforced, particularly if there's a long gainer. Maybe it goes back for 6. We're going to have to explain the fact that, look, my partner saw that clearly as a side block. We're picking it up, and coach, if the situation was reversed, we would do the same for your team. And we live on, we move on, and we don't spend a lot of time with it. We gave an explanation, put the ball in play, and they'll go back to coaching. All right, so that leads into our sideline communication that we already talked about. A couple of things that, like everything else, and referees are used to practicing in front of a mirror in terms of making announcements. As sideline officials, we also need to practice in terms of our communication on things such as what we just talked about. Coach, the important thing is that we got it right. We fixed it, we corrected it, we picked up a flag. We do the same thing if the situation was reversed. And let's say something happens and the coach wants a flag that we didn't throw. Say a holding after the runner has gone past that engagement. What we would say is something along the lines of that action didn't have anything to do with the result of the play. Those are things that you can practice and you should be prepared to use when the time comes along. All right, so in terms of quality fouls, I'm going to bring all 3 key points up at the same time. There are 3 elements that have to be considered, and we'll go through in more depth on each one in just a minute. They are visible. Is this situation something that you can clearly see from your position occurred? You might feel in your own mind that someone is holding someone else, but you can't see the hands because the hands are inside of the frame of the body. Don't guess. Don't say, well, he must have held him. No, there has to be an indicator that would demonstrate the fact that there was a restriction there. If it's not visible, stay off of it. Number two, it has to be material. In other words, it's something that is clearly defined in the rule book. And number three, and the most critical one, is it has to take something away from the opponent. So the first one is the easiest. That's the visible. Essentially, it's going to show up on film. And folks, we live in a world where if you have proof it didn't happen. So it does need to show up on video. Now, we realize that there are times when video cuts off too quickly or maybe doesn't show particularly an unsporting or an unsafe act off of the screen. But most of the plays, such as the one that's depicted here, is visible. So this is potentially a foul. Now, I say potentially a foul because of the factors we're going to talk about in just a minute. If this defensive back is able to make this tackle, even though we have a visible restriction, this is not a foul we want called because obviously the restriction had no disadvantage to the defensive player making this tackle. Well, it gets a little tougher with material because now we need to quickly process when we see something out in the field. Okay, that was a hook and turn. That was early contact. We need to quickly process when something happens on the field and know that it either fits a category or it does not. And frankly, if it doesn't fit a category, you don't have foul. So then we need to know the indicators, like in the case of holding, the indicators would be grab and restrict, hook and turn, for instance. There'd be two examples. Now things get really, really interesting with the third piece, and that's where we need to use the most patience, and it requires us to use football IQ and a number of higher level thinking skills that are developed over a period of time. So what we're talking about would be action that is visible, it's material, but the other thing is that it prevents, say, a potential tackler from making a play, or it hinders a receiver, say one arm is held down and now he's trying to go up with one arm to catch a pass. Okay, that would represent an unfair advantage. Now, we're going to require opponents to make an effort. And I saw this a number of times during my time on the career, on the field, during my career on the field, where an opponent seemed to give up, where I thought, well, that probably would have qualified as a foul if they'd really tried to work to get off of that block. But if he was willing to be held without really putting up a protest, okay. And I would stay off of it and I'd look at the video and say, thank you, Lord, that I didn't throw on that play. All right, so if you're going to pull out the laundry and throw a foul, you need to have all three of these things in place. Visible, material, take something away. If not, stay off of it. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this next slide. It happened to be to illustrate my last few years on the field. And when you see the PowerPoint, if you want to go in and look at this in great detail, you'll probably see some interesting statistics that you may want to ask me about later. But in sum, the baseline year where I did not go to a postseason assignment, I had 2 fouls a game at my deep wing position, normally side judge. Now, those were fouls that were directly attributable to me, not fouls where I was down with the back judge or I was a support flag on something that the line of scrimmage official threw. These were fouls directly attributable to the side judge, and almost 2 per game. For the next 7 years, my foul selection went down by an average of 1 per game. And as a result of that, over that 7-year period of time, I had 8 postseason assignments. Does quality foul selection, make it be there philosophy work? You're darn right it does. You're darn right it does. As soon as I got that figured out, unfortunately too late in my career, it made a marketable difference in terms of how my work was viewed, the value of it, and the fact that postseason was a part of the experience for me. So if we're not evaluated on the basis of how many flags we throw in a game, what is the criteria? Well, right here, these four things. First of all, game control. We have to protect player safety. We need to make sure that the game is played in a way, or we do everything in our power to make sure that the game is played in a way that is fitting of the institutions that are represented there. Secondly, how we manage the game. How do we do with their communication to the sideline? How do we handle the toss? Is that clear to the press box who won the toss and what is going to happen as a result of the options that come from the team that won the toss? What do we do with the game clock and the play clock? The chains. All those things represent the smoothness and the flow that will help us be viewed properly as a high functioning crew. Crew consistency. We've got to be on the same page beginning to end. It took me a long time in my career, both football and basketball, to figure out what a coach was talking about when that coined, what I thought was a coined phrase, they're inconsistent or we need more consistency came out. What they were really talking about is plays that happened early in the game were officiated consistently through the rest of the game. Pure and simple. Beginning to end, they knew what to expect. If something similar happened, they knew that it either was going to be a foul or it wasn't going to be a foul. We've got to get the big ones. Those are the ones that really, really count. And then last, but certainly not least, we have to cover the field. You know, the play of the game might be in the first quarter, and it might be whether the runner was tackled short of the goal line or was able to get the ball over the pylon for a score. So mechanics are huge. We have to make sure that we are where we need to be, making decisions that represent to the best of our ability exactly what occurred. All right, so in sum, avoid the game interrupters, stay off marginal fouls. Please, please, please stay off marginal fouls. Take your time. Don't be in a hurry to rush to judgment on a play. Take a moment to digest what happened and also take a moment to truly determine whether that foul is required from an advantage, disadvantage standpoint. Be consistent, you know, supervisor expectations at all levels would be that we get the big ones and we pass on the little ones and we play on. Trust me, the coaches and the players will adjust if we focus on just getting the big ones. Make sure that your standards are high. Make sure that first foul that occurs in any category is one that we can live with for the rest of the game, that grandma in the top row said, yep, that's holding. Otherwise, we're passing. We got to trust and communicate, make sure that we're working together as a crew. And if we do those things, we will be successful on individual plays, on quarters, on games, on seasons. All right, questions so far. We have anything in the chat, Gregor?
Nope, nothing in the chat yet.
All right, let's graduate then to our plays that will illustrate the concepts that we're talking about. Most of these are going to come from the semis and the finals that we had in Michigan this year. I say Michigan because we do have some folks that are joining us from out of the state, and welcome to those folks as well. All right, now this first clip should be familiar to you. We've seen it with a couple of different contexts. The context we're going to use tonight is at the top of the screen. There's one-on-one coverage out here, DB and wide receiver. All right, so what we're looking at is at the top of the screen. Now, if we let this run, that was pretty bouncy for me, Gregor. Maybe it's just my internet. But what we had was an engagement. And Potentially, we had a defensive holding, and potentially we had a receiver that is pushing off. Now, something is going to have to be extremely definitive for us to make a decision in a situation like this where we're going to throw a flag. Um, these are two highly skilled athletes. We want to make sure that early in the game that we have a very, very high standard. And here, the receiver clears the DB without really any problem, and the ball doesn't even go to him anyway. Um, and then the action downfield, we talked about the fact that the deep wing did not get enough depth, that he was too focused on this engagement at the top of the screen, and also that the back judge did a great job ruling this as an incomplete pass. All right, next clip is number 134. All right, what we're going to get is we're going to get a pass down towards the bottom of the screen, and we're going to have a defensive back and a wide receiver that essentially we've got a jump ball here. So absent someone doing something really, really radical, like pushing someone out of the way or throwing them to the turf, we're going to let the strong survive here. And we're just going to let them sort it out and make a play. Might end up being an incomplete pass, could be an interception, could be a catch, but don't try to overly officiate plays like this. See, we've got a little contact there. That's a nothing. That's a nothing burger. Don't try to make something out of that. Leave it alone. Let them sort it out. Play on some hands, but made no difference whatsoever. That's just an intercepted pass. The deep wing does a nice job staying behind it, officiating the blocking, and finishing the play. Okay, next clip should be number 26. Now let's compare and contrast that last play to this one. Jump ball, big contact, flag. Why is that a foul? That, and if we had more time, we would maybe do a poll. But let me just, in the interest of time, say the big difference here is that the defensive back makes early contact, but is not playing the ball. Now, if he's looking back at the ball, if he is legitimately playing this ball, this is probably a no call. But the problem is that the receiver is in position to make a play, and the defensive back is not. He's playing the man, not the ball, and pass interference is the correct call. So understand the difference between the two. When both players are playing the ball, it's going to be a much higher threshold to consider a foul than if one is not. It's not automatic. In fact, let me point out that in pass interference, there's nowhere in the book that says not playing the ball is a foul. We have to have a mitigating factor to go with it. Early contact, hook and turn, some other factor that takes the receiver out of the play. All right, next clip.
I don't know, Rich. I was just going to bring up the point when the quarterback passed that. When he, just as his arm was moving, it looked like the ball might have been deflected. It's very hard to tell on tape, but it looked like could have been partially, which would take away.
Yes, it would. All right, Gary, I think that's you speaking, right? If I recognize your voice.
It is.
Okay, thank you. That's a great point. All right, so now, first of all, what I would hope that we would see from the referee and perhaps the umpire would be a tip signal. But whether the signal is given or not, if that's what you have, at the end of the play, we're going to come in, we're going to have some conversation, and then the question would be, what do you have downfield? Make sure that we have confirmation of what they have downfield. And then you're going to give your information to say, well, I had a tip ball by the defensive player, which means this is not going to be a foul for DPI. You flip on your microphone, you make that announcement. It would be best if you've got a number of the player that deflects this ball or tips it, to be able to say there's no foul on the play for pass interference. Defensive player number 55 deflected the ball, which by rule negates pass interference. Turn off your microphone, mark the ball ready for play, and we play on. Now here, I believe this is on 4th down, so we would have a turnover. Good point, Gary. Thank you. All right, next clip. Now we're going to get a flag by the back judge for a foul on number 0. Okay, so let's take that back. He comes out, first of all, back judge does a nice job identifying his priority on this play and recognizes where the runner is. You can see the hands are outside of the frame of the body, which makes 0 suspect right from the get-go. So back judge sees this, and now his next decision is there restriction? Does this illegal act take number 2, I believe, of the defensive back out of the play? And then the other factor that has to be considered is where is the runner when the restriction takes place? And as you can see, it's clearly at the point of attack. And without the restriction, probably this DB number 2 is involved in a tackle. This results in additional yardage, including a first down, and represents correct judgment by the back judge. Okay, next clip. All right, to the kicking game. Now, what we're going to get is we're going to get an engagement towards the bottom of the screen. Now, this is a 7-person game, and we'll say this is the side judge. This action right there at the 40-yard line is the responsibility of the side judge in terms of judging this contact. That's the first threat down the field on that side of the field, and therefore a determination needs to be made in terms of this contact. Now, if we had an end zone view, it would be helpful to make a determination exactly what happens here. From this view, it appears that number 3 was on his way down, and on his way down got a piece of the flyer to assist bringing him to the turf and out of the play. I can't swear to it because of just the angle here, but it certainly is suspicious in terms of being a foul. Now, the fact that it is on the other side of the field, does that matter? If it was a normal holding situation, I would say yes. But here, this is a takedown. If that's what we're deeming it as, is a pull down, a reverse takedown, and is another way to describe it. And if that's what took place, then a foul would be justified in this action. But the key is that the side judge must know how those players went to the turf. And if there's not a foul here, would expect that he or she would have an explanation to say they got their feet tangled up and I deemed it to be incidental contact. Okay. Then we can agree or disagree, but at least we have an answer and a justification to start. All right, next clip, please. All right, now this is an important context here for us to consider. The block in question is the one widest towards, well, it's actually in the middle of the screen. It's out here almost to the far right of the screen. What we're going to get is this wide receiver is going to lock up with the DB. Now, There may or may not be some restriction there, but you can see that the runner is considerably behind where he is. But the DB defeats whatever was there, legal, illegal, he defeats the block. There is a clear space between the two players. There's not continuous contact here of the block, which means that the blocker must get to the side of the defensive player to avoid a block in the back. And in this particular case, the flag for an IBB is correct. I would not support holding here because the DB was able to defeat the action. The following action was the push in the back. So there again, what you report, what you enforce is very, very important. So on the foul sheet, if you write this down as holding, and you don't foul it as a block in the back, you're going to get both an incorrect call and you're also going to get a missed no call. So we need to understand what we have and why we have it. Okay, next clip. All right, now the video is not real great here. But down at the bottom of the screen, the DB and the defensive back are locked up. Now, to compare and contrast, what we are going to have here is continuous contact by the wide receiver, and then eventually he gives him a little nudge in the back. But the point of the matter is, and the reason why that's not a foul, is that contact was maintained throughout the block. There was no separation. There was no chase mode here. Legal action by the wide receiver, play on. So those two comparisons are essential for us to get plays like this correct. All right, Gregor, let's transition now to referee U. I know this first play is going to be a correct DPI call, and it's going to happen at the top of the screen, and you're probably going to recognize it as being a fairly obvious situation here. Now, we don't have the benefit of an end zone view, but clearly the ball is in a position where the receiver could realistically be able to catch this ball. Contact is early from behind, and we get a flag down. So correct judgment by, we'll say that this is the field judge. Now, what I want to point out here is while the call is correct, we need to finish every play. So what caused this play to become dead? Was it the foul? No. What caused it to become dead was the incomplete pass. So our deep wing needs to signal incomplete pass and then either come all the way to the referee or with 0-2-0 report the foul accordingly. Now, back judges. Obviously, this is not your key, so there's no need for you to get involved in this. But if there's any question, like say I realize high school does not have catchability as a factor, but in a conversation with Mark Ewell a year or so ago, he said that even though it's technically not a part of the book, catchability, that in terms of it having a factor in whether this plays like this should be called a foul, do have applicability. So let's say this ball ends up in the stands or way, way, way out of bounds. The expectation would be that the back judge would come over and say, whoa, Rich, slow down. What do you have here? Were you aware that this pass landed back at the wall? Oh, no, I wasn't. All right, so maybe that affects the decision to either pick it up or not. So we have to have that communication. All right, next clip. All right, so in this next clip, we're going to have some contact. It's at the top of the screen. The DB is going to lock up with the receiver. Clearly, they're in contact with one another, hands on the guy, but you can see the DB gets his hand out in front of the receiver and deflects this ball. Contact, but not a foul. Good defensive back play. And once again, this would be an example of intestinal fortitude to be able to make a no call when maybe it looks like to most of the people in the stands and certainly the coaching staff for the orange team that this should have been a foul. Nice job by both the back judge and the D point. Okay. You can see right away, we don't go crazy with incomplete signals. We make one nice, firm, incomplete signal. We let the play settle, and then and only then do we look for another ball. Okay. All right, next clip.
Hey, Rich, real quick, could you comment on this back judge's initial position? It looks like they're starting
Sure.
in the middle of the end zone. Ball was snapped
Yep.
around the 22. So when should we be starting in the middle of the end zone as a back judge, or should we
Okay.
not?
This is a good precursor for what we're going to talk about next week, but we'll touch on it very, very briefly. Back judges have three options for their positioning. One would be the goal line, one would be the end line, and in certain situations, they can be midway in the end zone. So where the back judge is here is acceptable by our mechanics. The ball was snapped from the 22. So my assumption is that the back judge felt that starting on the goal line, particularly with a passing offense, might have been a bit aggressive. So therefore, he didn't want to start on the goal line, but he also felt like starting on the end line that maybe he was not as engaged as he would like to be. I will say this though. I do prefer that if there's question in terms of whether we start in the middle of the end zone or the end line, my preference would be that you start on the end line because then you never have to find it. You're starting there, and unless you move from it, your feet are where you need to be. So when in doubt, just like when we have action near the goal line, when in doubt, go to the goal line, don't start at the 5. And conversely, if you're not sure if you should start at the midpoint of the end zone or the end line, go to the end line. But in short, the back judge is within his parameters in terms of starting midway in the end zone.
Hey, Rich, would you like to comment in case for those of us who do 5-man games uh, regarding the back judge's position? Because I know in 5-man mechanics, the short wings actually would take the goal line once the ball reaches the 10. But I thought maybe you might want to comment in 5-man mechanics.
Yeah, time, score, and situation would have to be factored in here. The most important line on the field, of course, is the goal line. But as a back judge, if I had scouted a particular team and I knew that they like to go deep into the end zone, that might affect my positioning. Certainly, if you're going to start at the goal line from the 22-yard line with a passing team like what Belleville is, you better be prepared to pretty quickly get back to your end line to defend that line. So there's not a real smooth and easy answer here. It's a feel situation. As long as the back judge is acting in good faith and is communicating with his brother and sister officials in terms of his location, that would be really the key factor in my mind.
All right.
Helpful?
Yeah, appreciate it.
No problem. Glad to do it. All right. This next clip is going to be a little offensive pass interference philosophy. Now, what we're going to get at the top of the screen is the wide receiver makes an aggressive move towards the middle of the field. Now, anytime you have a receiver that is going towards the middle of the field, your radar should go up because number one, he can foul more readily, and number two, he can also be fouled. So we need to give that player important and attention to know exactly what occurred on the play. In this particular case, the defensive back pretty well took him off of any picking action because he's the one that initiates contact and maintains contact with that player throughout that down. So even if there had been contact with another defensive player, we would deem that the receiver was legal because the defensive back put him into that position. Essentially, the receiver needs to go there without any direction of his own volition with the expressed intent to pick somebody off. Here, it's just a good football play, and the pass goes to the wing, and the defense made a good play stopping him short of the goal line. I'll also comment on the short wing's mechanics. He does a good job getting to the goal line. That's job one. But number two is he needs to make sure that the goal line behind him is clear. That orange pylon, that G, that should be back another 6 feet or so. We don't need that. Come on, this is Ford Field. We don't need that little orange pylon to let people know that that's the goal line. Get that out of there so that you can back up. You can see that he's in crisis mode here a bit. He's trying to back up way too quickly. This is a really good way to have players roll up on you, and that's never, never good. So if you've got the pylon out of the way as a short wing or a deep wing, then you're able to back straight up, keeping the goal line between your legs where it's supposed to be, and be much safer and come to a better, more decisive, accurate decision in terms of, is this a touchdown, short of the goal line, what have you. Number of things going on with that play. All right, next one also deals with potential interference, pass interference. This is one that is a suspect defensive holding. Now, again, it would be nice if we had an end zone view to be able to see what happens here. I have a suspicion that this action by the DB slows the receiver. You got an arm around the waist. It appears contact is maintained. Now, that in and of itself isn't a foul, but the fouling action would be if we deemed the player to be slowed down by this potential restriction.
I think, yeah, Rich, I was just going to comment. It just seems what makes this really an interesting play is that slowdown happens in only like one step, maybe a step and a quarter or a half. And that's a quick judgment call.
It is. Yep.
And maybe
And
it doesn't appear as big as others, but
right.
when I saw it the second time around, you can see that it did slow him down a half step for sure.
Now, even though this is the key for the deep wing, that doesn't mean that the back judge can't get involved. Now, in this formation, it may be that the back judge was shading towards the top of the screen and may have gotten to this late. We're not going to guess, folks. Please, please, please do not guess. I think is not enough. It's I know, or this is what happened, not this is what I think happened. I would much rather that we stay off of a play like this, make it incomplete, than to have the back judge say, oh, that looked bad, I'm going to throw on this, when he or she did not see the entire action. Okay, next clip. this is another potential OPI situation. If you go back to the snap here, you're going to see crossing action by these receivers. Now, again, the defensive back engages the receiver. That's a very, very important consideration. So had the wide receiver come in contact with the defensive back that ultimately covered this play at the sideline, we would excuse that from the standpoint of the defensive back putting him into that contact. Now, in this case, it's pretty obvious there's no contact, so not a problem. The other thing that I would mention here, and we'll get more into this next week, from a deep wing perspective, I'm going to discourage you from backpedaling. You can see we're backpedaling here. Now, the rest of the story is that this deep wing is also a back judge at the collegiate level and is used to backpedaling. And there is a slight difference between those positions. Back judges have the latitude to backpedal a little bit until they can see their cushion is closing. Deep wings do not have that same latitude. So would rather see some shuffle, run, transitioning to the run with shoulders parallel to the line of scrimmage than this action where you can see we are 90 degrees from the sideline and backpedaling. Okay. All right, right off the bat, you can see the flyer defeats the guy that's blocking him, and he pushes him in the back. This is chase mode when whether it's the defensive back or in this case a flyer is ahead of the player that's blocking him. All of the contact needs to be from the side to be legal, and here it is not. So this would be considered chase mode and therefore a foul. Now, by philosophy, if the block in the back occurs simultaneous to or close to the completion of a fair catch, we don't recognize it as being a foul. But you can see here that there's a considerable time differential between the block in the back and when the fair catch is completed. And we do have a flag down. You can see it at the bottom of the screen. This is a correct call for two reasons. Number one, chase mode and block in the back. And number two, that it was not close to or simultaneous with the fair catch. So good job by the deep wing at the bottom of the screen. All right, the next one should be number 31, Gregor. All right, what happened there at the bottom of the screen? That's one of those examples where it looks really, really bad. Maybe there's a foul there. If there's a foul, it's for a takedown by, no, it's going to be the players just ahead of that. Right here. This appears to be a reverse takedown where the player just pulls him on top of himself. Now, let's say that the first block is legal, and then the players that are following behind closer to the middle of the field, they get their feet tangled up. And again, that's going to look really, really bad, but the information is going to be to the coach that wants a foul. The first block was legal, and then as the players were falling, the other players fell into them. That's why we had the scrum. But this would be a correct call if thrown by the deep wing for a holding takedown. And in your foul description, you would say that it was a reverse takedown. But the other action does not appear to me to be a foul. Now, this play gets up on our back judge initially, and it also gets up on our deep wing. We have got to be able to read, if you remember back to our discussion about free and scrimmage kicks, we've got to see we're backpedaling. Backpedaling gets us in trouble as deep wings. When we recognize that we need to give ground, we need to open up that hip and get some depth with our torso turned so that our shoulders are parallel to the line, to the sideline, which also gives us a chance to observe players. So a little refresher there back to our free and scrimmage kick mechanics. All right, the last clip that we're going to see tonight is number 131. And it's in here for a reason, not because it's a kickoff play, although certainly we need to remember that potentially there are fouls. But again, we need to make sure that we're not guessing. If we don't have full and complete knowledge, stay off of fouls. And if someone else has a look at it, maybe they can help us out. What we're going to get is a block in the back that's going to occur at about the 25-yard line. Now, from a front four perspective, back judge, umpire, field judge, side judge, we can get caught up in the traffic and not be able to see as well as we would like. So again, if you don't have a clear-cut view of this, stay off of it. And in our work with the referee and the two line of scrimmage officials, we need to make sure that they understand that the deeper the players get and the more traffic there is around them, the more help we're going to need from the referee and the short wings. If this is a foul, and it certainly is suspect for being a foul, either as a block in the back or it really looks like a takedown from behind, we need to get that flag down from either the referee or one of the short wings. Now, we probably overpenetrated here as a deep wing guy at the 50-yard line. We don't recognize quite quickly enough, probably looking at blocks, but again, we can't have our feet in cement. We have to be prepared to do multiple things, and he was able to stay just ahead of this play, but would much prefer that he got started sooner and then make that full commitment to his retreat. Okay, Gregor, that's the video for tonight. We did a much better job time-wise, so we're going to be much closer to an hour. Any questions on make it be their fouls, foul selection, quality fouls? Can't emphasize enough the importance of the process that you follow to determine whether an action qualifies for a flag/foul or not. So when you get the PowerPoint, feel free to go back over it again, review it, study it, talk about it within your crew, and remember when you see it, if you look at my own personal experience for that 8-year period of time, you're going to see where as soon as I got it into my hard head that I needed to slow down and be patient and wait to see the net result of what potentially was a foul. As soon as I got that through my head and understood it and applied it, my lot in life went up considerably in terms of the number of contests that I work, particularly in postseason. And the same thing will be true for you if you're faithful to the process. And a big part of that is to make sure that your crew is all on the same page with you to get that done. We're going to be viewed based on how we handle those things. One of those last slides talked about mechanics, game control, game management, consistency within the crew, our communication with the sideline. Those sorts of things will be the things that separate us from others, hopefully in positive ways, if we're faithful to the process. So, Gregor, do we have any questions in the chat?
Nope, nothing there, but if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
Okay, just a reminder that we'll go back to Monday next week, so a week from tomorrow at 8 o'clock. We will be back and we will be focusing on base mechanics. And once again, that was intentional on my part because recognizing that you just don't get the reps in the preseason, we need to give you those reminders and help you so that when you hit the field for that first varsity contest on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, that you're as well drilled and as well thought out in terms of what you need to do and what you need to be thinking as possible. So the other thing that I want to mention before we close tonight is that Gregor and I have consulted, and we're going to set Monday during the regular season to be our weekly study group session. And we're going to go at 7 o'clock on Monday nights. The exception will be the first Monday, which is Labor Day. So instead of going Monday, September 1st or 2nd, I think it's the 2nd, we're going to go to Wednesday, the 4th for the first week only. And then we're going to go for the rest of the year to Mondays at 7. When we get to our regular season and we're doing these weekly sessions, I need you to help the whole group by sending me either clips that you've cut in Huddle for me to look at, to consider for inclusion with the whole group, or if you'll give me a game, including the group that assigned it, and the play number and a quick description of what you're looking at, then I'll go in and take a look at it and then make a determination whether we're going to use it, and if so, how. But this will go a lot smoother. It'll be a lot more helpful to you if you are willing to contribute to this process. Now, that goes back to the first thing that I said when we started this back in July. There's got to be trust within the room. We have got to have confidence that we're not going to be viewed as some sort of schmuck or not a good official if a clip is presented that maybe we don't handle quite right mechanically, or maybe we went a little too quick and we called a foul that maybe we should have passed on. That's the one disqualifier that will get you booted out of this group, is if you're guilty of ripping brother or sister officials. There'll be no tolerance for that. So we got to have that confidence in each other. And if you are willing to do that, my admiration for you will go up considerably if you're willing to send clips, particularly when it's maybe not your finest moment. I've been there, I've been on training tapes and messed them up with the best of them. And it's not the greatest feeling in the world, but we got to be adult about this and professional and realize that we're in this for the benefit of everyone. So with that, please put on your calendar or first of all, look for the recorded version of the session tonight, along with the PowerPoint. The link that you use tonight is recurring, so you can save that for the entire year, and we'll get back together on the 26th at 8 p.m. So hopefully the Tigers are ahead. Scooble's pitching tonight, and it'd be nice to take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. So God bless you all. Take care and continue to work hard in preparation for your season ahead. Good night.